Number 3, lack of problem-solving skills. I don't know, you're going to have to get the squeak out of this thing, Mike. Needs to be lubricated or something. This definition of a dysfunctional family is universally pretty well accepted by social scientists in the world. Some may deviate from it somehow or maybe add more, but I like to keep things as simple as possible. Psychology gets a little too complicated as it is when man starts to mess with it. So let's keep it as simple as possible. First of all, when you have a dysfunctional family, you have to have a primary stressor. Okay? There's a primary stressor. And the primary stressor is the one that calls the shots. I'll put it down here if you can still read it or not. A primary stressor calls the shots in a dysfunctional home. He's the controller. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a man. It can be a woman. In most cases, it's a man, but I've dealt with cases where the woman is the primary stressor. And so, whenever you're a controller, whenever you come in contact with a controller, you've got to realize that they have deep insecurities, otherwise they wouldn't be a controller. Whether it's in the church or in the home. And we have controllers in the church, don't we? Some of them are elders. But you've got to realize psychologically, a controller has deep insecurity issues. Otherwise, he wouldn't have to be a controller. I mean, if you feel good about yourself, if you have a good relationship with God, if you recognize your gifts and talents without boasting about it, but feeling secure in who you are and your relationship with God, you don't have to control people. It's not necessary. It'll cause you more pain and sorrow in the long run anyway, but you don't have to if you feel good about yourself. So you've got to realize, even though controllers put on this facade and have it all together and be the smartest person in the room, and be the most talented person, knows everything, whenever you come across a person who thinks he's the most talented person in the room and knows everything, you know right away he's got security issues. You know right away he's compensating, overcompensating for his own insecurities. So, that's what controllers do. I don't know how many I've counseled over the last few years, but I have had several women, in fact it's almost been my specialty, I've had several women come to me and talk to me about their controlling husbands. And how in the beginning they thought they were so sweet and everything when the husband wooed them, you know, and all that kind of good, dated, you know, and would do anything in the world for them. And then after marriage, within about 6 months, everything changed. And he controlled my life. By the way, let me add something else in the marriage game. Controllers usually wind up controlling dependent kind of women, passive kind of women. Because if the man's a controller, same thing, reverse of course, with the woman, if she's a controller, she'll wind up marrying a passive man. Because men who are strong in themselves, they're not passive, they're just strong. They're not controllers, but they're strong, and they know themselves and who they are. And they don't want to be controlled by a controlling man. Women who are confident in themselves, men who are confident in themselves, they don't want to be controlled by a controlling woman or a controlling man. And so eventually they spy this thing out, they realize, okay, I've had enough of this guy, I'm on my way. I've had enough of this gal, I'm on my way. So they wind up marrying passive people for husbands and wives. And then the journey begins. Then they have children. And then the primary stressor is controlling every facet of their lives. Because he's insecure, he is concerned about anything going on in the family that might reflect on him and his sense of control, his sense of power, his sense of self-worth. And so kids have to do exactly what he tells them to. The wife has to do exactly what she tells them, what he tells her to do. By the way, let me put a side note in here. I've done a lot of research on dysfunctional families. One of the best books I read not too long ago talked about the fact that in most cases, research reveals that children who come out of especially a mother-dominant home have more propensity towards deviancy in their life. Children who come out of a dominant, now that doesn't mean that there aren't some problems over in the father-dominant home, but I'm just talking about the deviancy issues that come out of a mother-dominant home. And I've counseled pedophiles, even in prison, that came out of mother-dominant homes. I could spend more time on that. We don't have enough time to talk about that today. But whenever you get away from God's plan, you have problems. Whenever you do. Because Ephesians 5 is quite clear. Husbands, love your wives. Yes, wives, submit to your husbands. I understand it's there. But then over in verse 25 of chapter 5, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church. How much did he love the church? He gave his life for the church. Husbands, give your life for your wives. Nurture them. Love them. Just like Christ nurtured and loved the church. The primary stressor men do not do that. Because it's all about them. For controlling people, it's all about the controller. So, whenever little sis or little Junior wants to say something, do something, be something different, no, he can't do that. If Junior wants to do something besides be a football player, no, you're going to be a football player because that's what Dad says you're going to be. And if Junior wants to complain about something, shut up or you're going to get slapped. And when Junior does something wrong at school, guess whose fault it is? It's not Junior's because that reflects on the primary stressor. It is the teacher's fault, or the school's fault, or the administrator's fault, or what have you. And so every time a problem comes up, the primary stressor has a tendency to want to push it under the rug and ignore it because it reflects on him and his insecurities. So you can see then that he doesn't allow the children to have their own personal identity. They can't be who they are and who they want to be. They have to be what Dad wants them to be. For various reasons. Maybe because it'll pump Dad up if he's a good football player. Maybe because he has masculine insecurity issues and he doesn't want his son just being a bookworm, you know. Or a clarinet player or what have you, okay? And so he can't allow his son just to be who he wants to be. Little sis, maybe she wants to be an actress or something. And he can't allow that for various reasons. So we're not allowing, in this kind of situation, this kind of setting, we're not allowing personal identity. Now you might say, well, is that really that important? It's vitally important. When children grow up, when they're first born, they're almost a complete clear slate. There's some instinctual things that they'll have as a natural way of behaving, but to a great degree, everything is a learning experience. And so there are certain things they're going to learn. Of course, they're going to learn how to speak eventually. They're going to learn how to eat, learn how to walk, learn how to potty, all those kind of things. There's another thing they're going to learn whether they want to or not, because it's built into the human psyche by God. They're going to learn a self-identity, or a self-concept, as psychologists call it. And so they're going to learn eventually how they're going to see themselves and how they think the world sees them. And that's going to impact their life the rest of their life. It's going to impact the choices they make. It's going to impact who they marry. It's going to impact perhaps to some degree what their career is going to be. It's going to impact whether or not they're going to have a miserable life or fulfilling the life in Christ. It's going to impact how they relate to God and how they see themselves as a Christian. All of this is being impacted in this dysfunctional home in the early stages of life for these children. Now, dysfunctional families don't always look like we think they look. Sometimes they're stereotyped as being, the one with an alcoholic father, living in a slum somewhere area, and not having much money or anything, and always coming, if they do come to church, they come in rags, and they're the poor folks, they don't have it together. Let me tell you something. Dysfunctionality is no respect of persons. It could be a part of a family where the husband's an elder or preacher. It could be a part of the family where they're wealthy and they come together. When they come to church, they're dressed quite well. They act well. They seem to be so spiritual. They seem to have it all together and know the Bible. When they come to church, Bible class, and Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, all that's all going on there. It seems like they're so spiritual. But at home, they're somewhat terrorized. They're either intimidated or manipulated into being and doing what Dad wants them to be and do, or what moms want them to be or do. When I do these seminars,